Hello and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Alan, and I'm the marketing manager here at AppViewX. Our topic for today is Network Automation 101, where to begin, and it will be presented by Glenn Gray, Senior Solutions Architect here at AppViewX. Um, to give you some background on our company, AppViewX creates intuitive software that enables NetOps and SecOps teams to orchestrate, automate, and manage network infrastructure and security. Our customers include several Fortune 500 companies that use the platform at scale. We're headquartered in Seattle and have a presence in 7 locations across the globe. Just a little housekeeping before we begin. If you have any questions, please type them into the Zoom control panel at any time. I'll bring them up during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So let's get started, shall we? Over to Glenn. Hello, Glenn.
Hi, Alan. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Glenn Gray, Solutions Architect with AppViewX. I want to thank you all for joining us. I'd like to cover our agenda that we have planned for today. The topic, of course, is automation. And we'd like to begin by describing what the enterprise network environment looks like today, and then move into describing the basics of network automation. Moving on, we'll describe an incremental approach to network automation, and then describe some low-code automation solutions, and then open up for questions and answers. So starting off with what the network enterprise looks like today and what some of the challenges that many companies face. I think everyone can identify with the fact that it's becoming more and more expensive as the infrastructure grows, as enterprises migrate to hybrid, both on-prem, off-prem, cloud type IT infrastructure network environments. That brings increasing complexity. You have multiple technology expertise, participants and stakeholders that are required. Oftentimes there's proprietary technology as well as off-the-shelf technology. One of the bigger challenges is somewhat of the siloed nature that begins to evolve, where you have dedicated technology experts within one silo communicating with technology experts in other silos. Oftentimes that becomes challenging for maintaining clear and coherent communication, because oftentimes the vocabulary is significantly different. A lot of times you get disjointed services. You have proprietary technologies or legacy technologies that don't translate, communicate well, fit into other evolving service technologies or service points. So there's a lot of adaptation that comes into play. The overall asset management and single sign-on solutions, AAA control mechanisms, and all of this makes it very difficult to maintain life cycle for your services and applications. Now, the analysts have evaluated the marketplace. What they're seeing is that 49%, nearly 50%, enterprise environments plan to make strategic investments into network automation. And within the next 3 years, nearly half are going to be utilizing automation tools. So the market seems to be migrating pretty rapidly towards either discovering or adopting some methods of automation. They're realizing that throwing more people at a solution does not scale well. So what are some of the primary drivers for network automation? Achieving agility, obviously, is one of them. It's very time-consuming in most enterprise, most business environments to maintain the life cycle, to deploy new applications and services. The reduction of cost. Obviously, all of leadership and business economics drive to reduce cost, increase efficiencies, increase deployment time. Reduce deployment time. Eliminating errors. Ensuring compliance so that you have standard methodologies for deploying, so that you don't have a lot of variation in your end products. And then centralized management, the ability to control this broad, complex environment of infrastructure through centralized methodologies. I think that a lot of individual contributors can identify with the complex tasks of switching from one interface to another, to another, to another, one web user interface to another, or even multiple service platforms having to remotely log into dozens of interfaces in order to do their day-to-day tasks. So what are some of the basic components of network automation? Well, to start with, automation adoption processes is specific to each organization. There's not one size fits all when it comes to deploying automation. The ability to identify and embrace the approach that works best for your organization is critical in advancing towards maintaining or creating a more agile environment. The focus should always be on business value and end user experience. In other words, identify with how the task or process that you're trying to automate is going to achieve end user, improved end user experience or business value. Frame and follow a step-by-step systematic approach. I've often used the cliche, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. So having a framework or design structure that you're trying to achieve, have in mind what your end goal is, and then work step by step towards achieving that goal. Measure the automation success at various stages based on the business outcomes. So again, have I reached plateau number 1 before I exceed to plateau number 2? And then build concepts modeled around existing applications. There's no need to design the concepts around automation in a vacuum, because they need to be applied to your application, your service, your infrastructure. So begin to build the concepts and model them around your existing infrastructure, your existing applications. What are some of the incremental approaches towards network automation? Well, we recommend that you start by identifying the tasks. Perform a discovery of network change requests, for example, that are most common. Maybe look at your ticketing system, Jira, ServiceNow, Remedy, whatever the case may be. Run a simple report, starting with the number of change requests that have been completed, and then order them by frequency, looking at those that are the most frequent. If that's DDI type tasks like IP address management registrations, then maybe start there with automating the IP address management registry processes, DDI, IPAM, just as an example. Segment the tasks. So once you've identified what are the most common things that your IT stakeholders and members are performing, then begin to segment them. Okay, what is a common task that exists to some end, and then begin to categorize those. Oh, it's enable and disable pool members. It's registering of IP addresses. It's registering of A records in DNS. It's building virtual services. It's updating packages within my Nix environment, etc. Number 3, simplify and standardize those tasks into some reusable format or work process or input-output. Number 4, associate those service tasks into business-specific activities. I was mentioning a moment ago about working towards a business solution. So with each service task, Identify with what that particular task is going to accomplish, and then associate the service tasks towards that specific activity. Number 5, iterate the automation adoption. Add them incrementally. So start with, once you've identified those tasks and which are the most common, which are the most frequent, automate that particular one and then begin to adopt it, but maintain the required availability. And then last, begin to orchestrate them. Once you have those Lego building blocks, those incremental tasks automated, then you can begin to reorganize and orchestrate the individual tasks into a fully automated end-to-end service. So I'd like to go into more detail about some of those steps. Identifying the tasks. You identify diverse workloads and perform discovery on application deployment change requests. That's, again, looking at what are the most common changes, what are the most common tasks, and then break them down, identify what the workload looks like, what's involved in that particular workload. Make a list of those change requests and workflows that are currently being addressed manually. Determine the most common time-consuming and error-prone activities. Prioritize the requests by taking a business-driven approach. Again, to what end are we as an organization doing all this work for? And then prioritize those. Which are the most important? What do we want to address first? This will provide a framework for implementing the automation process. What must be automated, and just as importantly, what shouldn't be? Number 2, segment the tasks. Network teams receive change tickets at multiple layers. It doesn't always happen in the same order, same sequence. Now, based on various network services, segment the infrastructure into different blocks and analyze how they can interact and work together. So again, they don't always come in the same order, so you may have to segment them and then reorient them. Maybe I need to acquire the IP address first before I build a service pool member. That's one example. And then once I've built the service pool members, then I can build the pool, then I can build a virtual service. But hey, before I build the virtual service, I need to go back to the IP address management well and reserve another IP address. Oh, and by the way, create a record for this virtual service instance. So those are some of the examples of breaking down. Identify various dependencies to address cultural differences and bring in cross-team collaboration. What I've just sort of described as a use case scenario involved multiple technology stakeholders, system administrators, network administrators, security administrators in the case of firewall security policy parameters. So begin to collaborate, create crosstalk, work interactively so that you can begin to align and know what the input-output dependencies and interoperability requirements are for each of these building block components. Simplify and standardize. Define standard offerings for various services, work processes, and input outputs. It's just describing how the individual technology stakeholders and contributors bring their requirements, bring their vocabulary, bring their nuance into the discussion to begin that cross collaboration. Simplify the deployment process, reduces the time to market for both new and existing workloads. So you're evaluating the existing change routines that are common, as well as looking towards what new technologies you need to adopt. Once the standardization process is completed, the user can sequence and align individual service requests for a multi-threaded service delivery. So again, looking at what are the input-output requirements, standardizing them, and then you're able to align them to create sequential, parallel, multi-threaded service delivery environments. Associate the service tasks. Ensure that the service tasks are interoperable. Associate the incremental service tasks so that they align to create business services and activities. Allow for flexibility to associate and reassociate service tasks on demand. So it's not simply a method of creating it once and then it's static and left alone. The process of automation and agility is harnessing the ability to be flexible, to associate these tasks and then reassociate the service tasks if necessary, because first shot is not always going to be an accurate one. Deploy self-servicing capabilities and pave the way for improved operational efficiency. Self-servicing is the ability for the individual stakeholders to come and interact with the automation processes so that they bring their individual expertise and governance. And that will pave the way for that efficiency, because if you're having to go back through an escalation process, a single decision-making process, those contributors can be overwhelmed. Allow for multiple technology skill sets to continue to contribute with oversight and compliance assurance. So again, allowing for the technology skill sets to continue to be involved in the automation practices so that they can bring their specific knowledge to, is the interoperability most efficient? Is the alignment most effective? This step marks the start of a full-fledged automation solution. Once you have these contributors able to communicate effectively about how automation works towards the business-specific activities and enhancing the end-user experience. Iterate automation adoption. So you start small by automating existing tasks. This will allow your team to become familiar with the automation process and will provide insight into what other areas could benefit from automation. You'll want to iterate your automation initiatives, adding agility incrementally. So it's not a one-time event. It evolves and grows. And you'll want to maintain the required availability. Taking a more incremental and systematic approach paves the way for successful implementation at every level. Automation of the deployment process or orchestration is required to deliver applications rapidly. I don't think there's much argument about that. Everyone can pretty much identify with manually interacting with the complex, broad infrastructure, very time-consuming, lots of disconnected, disjointed interactions between technology skill sets, and thus very time-consuming. Creating a truly agile service environment requires different elements to be managed cohesively across technology skill sets. Very important concept, that cohesively across technology skill sets. Again, back to the complexity of technology skill sets interacting in a manual way, a lot of things just tend to get lost in translation. System admin doesn't talk NetOps. NetOps doesn't talk DevOps. Many environments don't talk security-related aspects. So with the ability to manage those cohesively across the technology skill sets in a meaningful way, really helps to facilitate a truly agile service environment. And prepare for end-to-end orchestration that provides for control over automation and other deployments. So all of those challenges, all of those touch points of how to frame up and approach automation, how can it be enabled in a low-code fashion? Well, you have on the left side lots of technology stakeholders, lots of technology skill sets. Well, how do they all commonly communicate and interact with a multi-vendor ecosystem, which has very nuanced, very highly advanced skill sets to maintain each one of the syntax environments, each one of the command line interfaces, web user interfaces of all of this infrastructure. We want to abstract it. You want to provide a core platform of services and be able to interact with them in a low-code library or studio type interaction that will allow you to do a business-driven or service-driven request to allocate a resource, to perform a task. Again, if I'm building an application, hey, I need a fully qualified domain name, I need IP address, I want to define a virtual service and then apply that IP address to it, I want to create a record, I need to facilitate security policy rules so that the outside world can communicate to that, and then build the load balanced pool infrastructure beneath that. And then the hybrid environments, when I have this infrastructure built across not only on-prem but cloud and third-party service providers, how can I integrate and interact and be able to make seamless requests or perform seamless tasks across these various environments? Now, the automation approach from AppViewX perspective follows the four-step methodology of the discovery, manage, design, and automate. Going back to the 6 steps that I was describing previously at the very beginning was that discovery aspect. What are my most common change tasks? What do those tasks actually consist of? How can I group those particular tasks into highly repeatable, reusable services? That goes in and involves into that management. You're then beginning to manage the individual tasks. And then regardless of the vendor, regardless of the infrastructure, the task is the same. It's the same requirement. However, the essence of the task might be slightly different. So discovery into manage is that evolution process. I've discovered what my individual tasks are for this vendor, for this environment, for this piece of infrastructure. Now I'm standardizing it. Now I'm making it available as a managed service. Then you're designing and orienting those individual tasks into some business activity, some ends to a mean. And then you begin to fully automate your services and your application instances across your environment. I'd like to quickly just jump over to a demo environment and show you a little bit about how the AppViewX platform extends some of these capabilities to its users. So here I'm going to log into my application instance. And I'll be brought to the landing page. Now, the inventory is where you're adding the multiple layers of infrastructure. We have across the top the ADC or load balanced environment, servers, DNS, firewall, WAF, switch, route, proxy, cloud, hardware security modules, and even others, things that you have programmable, say, APIs to or SSH connectivity to, things like that you can design and script for something that's not already defined within the platform. When you're adding devices and what available vendor products that we currently support in the flavor of application delivery controllers or load balancers, you see that there's a large variety there. Also a large variety of compute platform services. Various well-known DDI services. A large variety of firewall vendor platforms. Even web access firewall instances. switches, routers, proxy service instances, and the three most common well-known cloud service instances, AWS, Azure, and Google. In addition to the infrastructure or inventory that's managed, we can facilitate external authentication to easily map into existing IAM practices that would support LDAP, TACACS, Radius, and SAML, so that you're not reinventing or isolating your AAA requirements into a standalone environment that's redesigned. It would integrate into your LDAP Active Directory, TACACS, Radius, SAML infrastructure. All of this brings us to the capability to get an application-centric view of the infrastructure. So if we look at the App Vision module, we can see an example of a dynamically discovered application instance where we have the infrastructure in inventory of AppViewX. And this is one application instance. It's simply named by the service platform. In this case, it's an Apache. You'd see it's a apache.appvxlab.com, and we have it distributed across 4 security zones of varying vendor types, Juniper and Cisco ASA in this case, a variety of load balance solutions as well, F5, A10, Citrix, and again F5. We have visibility to the certificate instance. We have the visibility down to the state and status of the pool members itself. We can view things such as the detail on a specific application instance. We can see here, this is the load balance service instance for my prod apache.appvxlab.com service instance. I can perform basic functionality like enabling, disabling pool members. So that's the automation technique, one of the automation techniques. And I can view the configuration, for example, of the entire service point. I can see this across not only the load balance, but the firewall infrastructure as well. So when I look at the details, I can see what the specific security parameter rule sets are for that particular application-specific instance. So from my untrust zone to my compute zone, I can see what my particular rule looks like. I can also perform some troubleshooting techniques from this location by performing, I can execute command sets. So if I wanted to look at the ARP table, do a trace route, show the route table from this particular instance, I would have the availability to issue specific commands directly. So that's a brief demonstration of the AppViewX platform, how it enables low-code automation capabilities towards achieving full lifecycle automation. So let's talk a little bit about with and without the AppViewX platform. What does that look like? Well, in manual methodologies, I think most can identify with the implementation time that it takes for manual methodologies. You have network teams, you have hosting teams, you have governance or ITSM and ServiceNow and change management, you have the resource allocations. All of that interaction takes days, potentially weeks. With all of that collected into a low-code automation platform like AppViewX, you can turn that implementation time from days and weeks into mere minutes. So that concludes the slide and presentation. I'd like to open up to all of our viewers for any questions and answers. Well, if there's anyone that would like to volunteer to answer any questions, what are some of the challenges that you have experienced in your particular business environments? Do you feel there's a need for automation? Does anyone happen to have any examples of automation techniques that they've used or have been successful with? Alan, did we have any input on the chat session by chance? I have one question here. No, actually, I'm not sure if that's a question or not, but it says, how to automate network change? Well, very good question. As far as the network change itself, the AppViewX platform offers a visual workflow construct where you can orient the individual tasks. So as we were describing earlier, you can take and design individual workflows and then expose those to your consumers so that they may request those individual workflows. And the design component is where you will construct that. And then here's an example of an application. Let's look at this one called sample, where we have a catalog of available service tasks, and then we're orienting them through drag and drop in order to complete a complete service workflow. You can even integrate notifications for escalation into that, such as email notifications, Slack. You can integrate service ticket handling, like creating, closing, getting the updates of a certificate, a change request instance or service ticket. And then we have a variety of platform-specific or technology-specific tasks that, again, you just drag and drop and then orient so that you have that highly flexible, task-specific, block sequence-specific automation design platform. Were there any other questions? I had one other question. Can we schedule any process on a daily basis? Yes, each one of the service requests is available for scheduling, and that is either on demand or it can be deferred to a calendar date. And does it monitor all devices which are integrated into AppViewX? Yes, the platform provides monitoring and alert capabilities. So under logging, we can see that all objects and all platform devices are logged for all actions. So for example, I had performed an action of enable on a particular pool member, and we'll see that particular instance, which I'm highlighting here. The pool member at 10.10.2.14 listening on 4.4.3, that was the Apache. Instance 1 in zone 1 was enabled by me at that particular time. All of this can also be forwarded to external logging mechanisms, which you'll see I can define my external logging instance here. And likewise, I can generate alerts based on any of these actions. So if a pool member goes down, for example, I could trigger an alert notification to a SNMP trap listener or an email notification, and make appropriate technology skill sets aware of that particular event. Those are good questions. Any others? Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, you can feel free to add any questions that you might have at a later time and log your questions and comments at our website. And I'd also like to invite everyone to join us in future conversations. We have another webinar scheduled on August 29th at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern. That will cover Network Automation 102, Automate Your Network. And then our third in the series, Orchestrate Your Infrastructure, which will be held on September 25th. And I want to thank everyone for joining. I really appreciate the time. For AppViewX, again, my name is Glenn Gray. Any closing comments, Alon?
I think we're good. Thank you everyone for joining us. We look forward to seeing you for the next 2 webinars in this series.